Toxic relationships do not arise merely because others are manipulative, deceitful, unconscious, unexamined, and unresolved. That allows such people to draw near and remain. The truth, as Carl Jung would have said, is that the world mirrors back to us the state of our inner life. Those we attract, those we tolerate, and those we allow into our intimate space are not random. They reveal something about our psychological patterns. To free ourselves from the orbit of toxic people, we must first confront the secret within ourselves, the integration of shadow and the courage to live authentically. The secret is this: when you embody wholeness, when you are no longer fragmented or seeking unconsciously for someone else to complete you, those who thrive on manipulation lose their grip. Toxic people feed on weakness, on hidden guilt, on unacknowledged fears. But when you stand rooted in yourself, when you no longer deny the parts of you that once made you vulnerable, such people find no doorway into your soul. They turn away, not because you fought them, but because they can no longer find nourishment in you. The path is not easy. It requires that you face the shadow you have long ignored, the part of you that longs for approval, that fears rejection, that hides anger or resentment behind masks of kindness. Jung reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you make peace with your darkness, no one can use it against you. When you accept your imperfection, no one can manipulate your shame. This is the secret strength that makes toxic people vanish from your life, the radiance of authenticity born from the marriage of light and shadow. Toxic relationships do not appear in our lives by pure accident. They may feel sudden, as if an unhealthy person simply stumbled into our path. But the deeper truth is that such connections resonate with something unresolved within us. Carl Jung believed that life is not a collection of coincidences, but rather a symbolic unfolding of the psyche. Those who enter our lives often reflect back to us aspects of ourselves that we have not yet faced. A toxic person, then, can be understood not merely as a predator, but as a mirror held up to our unexamined wounds. Consider how a manipulative person finds their way into another's life. They are drawn to those who doubt their own worth, because doubt creates gaps through which control can seep in. Someone who has not yet confronted feelings of inadequacy may unconsciously invite others who affirm those doubts through criticism, neglect, or domination. Similarly, a person who denies their anger may attract individuals who provoke it, forcing them into confrontation with emotions they would rather avoid. In this way, toxic relationships serve as external manifestations of internal conflicts. The unconscious plays a decisive role here. Jung described it as a vast reservoir of forgotten experiences, repressed desires, and denied truths. When parts of ourselves are banished into this hidden realm, they do not disappear. Instead, they shape our encounters in the outer world, arranging situations that force us to look at what we ignore. If one represses vulnerability, life may present them with partners who exploit it. If one represses the need for boundaries, they may repeatedly attract those who violate them. The toxic person, then, is a teacher of sorts, unwanted but necessary, revealing to us the places where we are still unfinished. This perspective does not excuse harmful behavior, but it shifts our understanding of why such patterns persist. If we only view toxic people as external enemies, we miss the deeper lesson. We may cut ties with one manipulator, only to find another appears soon after. Without interchange, the outer pattern repeats. But if we ask ourselves, what part of me resonates with this dynamic? What unhealed wound is being mirrored here? Then the toxic encounter becomes an opportunity for growth. The painful truth is that we often unconsciously collaborate in our own suffering, not because we desire pain, but because the psyche seeks wholeness, and wholeness cannot be achieved by denying what is broken. By attracting relationships that touch our hidden wounds, life compels us to see them, to work with them, and to integrate them into consciousness. Thus, toxic relationships are not random misfortunes. They are psychological messages in human form. They reveal to us the unfinished business of the soul, the unresolved fragments of our inner life. Once we accept this, we stop asking only, "Why do toxic people find me?" and begin asking, "What within me is calling them forth?" It is through this shift from blame to self-inquiry that the cycle of toxic relationships begins to dissolve. The integration of the shadow is the most crucial step in disempowering toxic people. The shadow, as Jung defined it, is the part of ourselves that we repress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge. It contains all the impulses, emotions, and traits that our conscious identity does not wish to accept. Anger, envy, selfishness, vulnerability, or even power. Yet these disowned parts do not vanish simply because we reject them. They live on in the unconscious and quietly shape the way we interact with others. When we remain unaware of our shadow, it becomes the lever through which others manipulate us. A toxic person senses, often without words, what you have hidden from yourself. If you deny your anger, they will provoke you, knowing you will either suppress it or erupt uncontrollably. If you repress your longing for validation, they will withhold approval, dangling it just out of reach, keeping you bound to their control. If you conceal your ambition, they will dominate you, confident that you will never assert yourself. In every case, what has been banished to the shadow becomes the very thing that makes you vulnerable. Integration of the shadow means turning toward these denied aspects with honesty and courage. It does not mean indulging destructive impulses, nor does it mean becoming cold or ruthless. Rather, it means recognizing these traits as part of your totality and learning to work with them consciously. When you admit to yourself, "Yes, I can feel anger," or "Yes, I desire recognition," you take back the power that was once hidden in the dark. What was unconscious becomes conscious, and what was once a weapon for others to use against you becomes a source of strength. This process of shadow integration is not an abstract idea. It is experienced through daily life. Every irritation, every emotional trigger, every envy or resentment that arises is an invitation to examine the shadow. Instead of projecting blame outward, you ask, "What does this feeling reveal about me? What am I refusing to see in myself?" Each honest answer brings a fragment of the shadow into the light, where it can no longer be used as a secret entry point by toxic individuals. When the shadow is integrated, the games of manipulation lose their effect. The person who once used shame to control you discovers that you no longer fear your flaws. The one who tried to exploit your need for love finds that you already give that love to yourself. The one who attempted to make you doubt your worth realizes that you have claimed it independently. In this way, shadow integration is not only a path toward wholeness, but also a natural shield against toxicity. The more you bring light to the hidden corners of your psyche, the less susceptible you become to those who thrive in shadows. And once you embody this integrity, toxic people instinctively turn away. They cannot survive in the presence of someone who has embraced their own darkness and found strength within it. Toxic individuals draw their power from what remains unresolved within us: our unconscious guilt, our secret doubts, and the weaknesses we refuse to acknowledge. They do not create these vulnerabilities, but they exploit them with precision. Jung would say that what is unowned within the psyche becomes the very thing through which others gain power over us. When you are blind to your own guilt, someone else can press upon it endlessly. When you doubt your worth, another can manipulate you with conditional approval. When you refuse to see your own fear, it becomes the chain by which you are led. These hidden elements of the psyche are like open wounds. Even if covered with layers of denial, they remain sensitive, waiting for the slightest touch. Toxic people instinctively sense where these wounds lie. It is not merely intellectual calculation. They feel it, they gravitate toward it, and they learn how to press upon it until you surrender your energy to them. A controlling partner, for example, thrives not only on their own need for dominance, but on the other's hidden fear of abandonment. A manipulative friend continues their games only because the other secretly believes they deserve mistreatment. The toxicity persists not because of the manipulator's strength, but because of the unacknowledged weakness in the one being manipulated. But when these unconscious patterns are brought into awareness, the dynamic collapses. If you know your own guilt and accept it as part of being human, no one can wield it as a weapon against you. If you have faced your doubts and discovered your inherent worth, no one can hold you hostage through threats of rejection. The moment you accept your fear and make peace with it, others can no longer use it to control your choices. Self-knowledge is a shield that needs no aggression. It simply denies entry to those who feed on your hidden shame. This is why toxic individuals often withdraw from those who develop psychological clarity. Once they realize there is no hidden guilt to exploit, no buried fear to use, and no secret wound to manipulate, they lose interest. They require a host who is fragmented and unaware. They cannot survive in the presence of someone who has faced themselves fully. The relationship dissolves, not through conflict, but because the manipulator finds no more nourishment. In this sense, the most effective defense against toxicity is not confrontation, but illumination. To confront without self-knowledge is to fight while leaving the door wide open. To illuminate the unconscious, however, is to close the door gently but firmly so that no intruder can enter. Jung teaches us that by making the unconscious conscious, we strip away the hidden levers others once pulled. The power of toxic people is not truly theirs. It is borrowed from the parts of ourselves we refuse to claim. When we claim them, the borrowing ends, and with it, the hold they once had. To live authentically is to embrace all that you are without pretense, without masks, and without bending your soul to fit into the expectations of others. Authenticity is not about perfection, nor is it about becoming some idealized image of strength. It is about the simple yet profound act of aligning your outer life with your inner truth. Toxic people cannot survive in the presence of authenticity because their manipulations rely on disguise, on distortion, and on the cracks between who you are and who you pretend to be. When those cracks disappear, their influence withers. Jung observed that much of human suffering arises from the conflict between the persona, the mask we wear to face society, and the true self which resides beneath. We learn to play roles, the agreeable one, the strong one, the accommodating one. These roles may gain us approval, but they also create a split within us. Toxic individuals thrive in this split because they exploit the distance between the mask and the reality. They whisper into the gap, convincing us we are only as valuable as the mask we maintain. They remind us that if we drop the mask, love will be lost, and so we cling to the disguise, unaware that it makes us vulnerable to their control. Authenticity dissolves this split. When you are willing to live from your true center, even if it displeases others, you deprive manipulators of their favorite tool, your fear of rejection. You no longer hide your anger, your boundaries, your needs, or your vulnerabilities. You express them honestly, not as weapons, but as truths. And when you reveal yourself in this way, the toxic person has no place to insert their illusions. They cannot convince you to pretend because you no longer live for pretense. They cannot shame you because you no longer hide. This kind of authenticity requires great courage. Society does not encourage it. Indeed, it punishes those who stray too far from its expectations. Yet it is precisely this courage that creates a natural barrier against those who seek to drain your spirit. The authentic person may lose superficial approval, but they gain a deeper kind of freedom, the freedom of not needing permission to exist as they are. Toxic people sense this freedom and instinctively turn away, for it is incompatible with their need for control. Living authentically also creates relationships of an entirely different nature. When you no longer filter yourself to appease others, those who remain in your life are those who value you for your essence, not your performance. Toxic individuals cannot survive in such an environment because their strategies depend on deception and dependence. Authenticity shines a light too bright for their shadows to endure. Thus, authenticity is not only the path to psychological wholeness, but also the quiet secret that shields you from harm. By aligning your outer life with your inner truth, you become untouchable, not because you fight against toxicity, but because you leave no room for it to take root. When a person is bound by the craving for external validation, they become an easy target for those who seek control. The manipulator needs only to withhold approval or offer it selectively to keep their victim dancing in circles of insecurity. This dynamic is not born out of the toxic person's strength, but from the other's unacknowledged dependence on the opinions of others. To need constant reassurance is to place one's worth in someone else's hands, and those who understand this can use it like a leash. Jung would say that such dependence arises when the individual has not yet realized their own inner source of value, when they still seek outside themselves for confirmation of existence. The toxic person thrives in this environment. They sense that a single look of disapproval, a word of criticism, or a withdrawal of affection can destabilize the other. They manipulate by oscillating between praise and rejection, keeping the individual hungry for the next drop of recognition. This cycle mirrors the unconscious hunger within the psyche, the child's longing for unconditional love never fully acknowledged or healed. When we grow into adults without tending to this wound, we remain susceptible to anyone who offers to fill it. But when you free yourself from the need for validation, the dynamic collapses instantly. The toxic person can no longer bait you with approval because you have already granted it to yourself. They cannot destabilize you with rejection because you do not measure your worth against their shifting standards. Self-acceptance makes you unshakable. This does not mean you no longer appreciate encouragement or admiration. It means you no longer depend on it. Your foundation becomes internal, steady, and unmovable. Jung often spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are apart from collective expectations. This process demands that we stop living for applause and instead listen to the deeper voice within, the self that is not contingent on others' recognition. When you reach this stage, toxic individuals are naturally repelled. They cannot control someone who does not thirst for their approval. They cannot threaten someone who has already made peace with solitude, silence, and self-trust. To no longer crave validation is a profound liberation. It breaks the chains of dependency that manipulators so easily tug. It also transforms your relationships, for when you no longer need others to confirm your worth, you are free to engage with them authentically rather than transactionally. Love becomes real, not a bargain for approval. Friendship becomes genuine, not a stage for performance, and those who once sought to exploit your longing for recognition quietly disappear, for there is nothing left in you to sustain their power. Boundaries are not walls to keep the world out, but structures that protect the integrity of the self. Jung understood that the psyche, much like the body, requires a protective skin. Without it, we are left raw, exposed, and vulnerable to intrusion. Toxic people thrive where there are no boundaries. They test, they push, they encroach until the line between self and other dissolves. When you lack boundaries, you become clay in their hands, molded to suit their desires. But when boundaries are firmly established, the manipulator finds no opening to enter. A lack of boundaries often arises from unconscious fears: fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being disliked. Many people yield their space in order to keep peace, or they confuse self-sacrifice with love. Yet what they call kindness is often a hidden avoidance of conflict, and it is precisely this avoidance that toxic individuals exploit. They sense who is unwilling to say no, who hesitates to walk away, who fears the discomfort of confrontation. And once they sense it, they push further, consuming more until nothing of the self remains untouched. Healthy boundaries are a declaration of self-respect. They communicate without aggression that this is who I am and this is what I will not allow. Such clarity unsettles manipulators because their strategies depend on ambiguity. They seek those who hesitate, who doubt, who leave room for reinterpretation. A firm boundary leaves no such space. When you calmly and consistently enforce your limits, the toxic person either adapts, which often they cannot, or withdraws, for their methods no longer bear fruit. Jung would remind us that the act of setting boundaries is also an act of individuation. It is the process of recognizing yourself as a distinct being with your own values, needs, and truths, separate from the demands of the collective. To set a boundary is not cruelty. It is the affirmation that your life belongs to you. It is a way of saying yes to your inner wholeness by saying no to intrusion. The practice of boundaries is not only protective but transformative. At first, it may feel harsh or unnatural, especially for those conditioned to equate love with self-abandonment. But over time, boundaries become the soil in which authentic relationships can grow. When you no longer give away your time, energy, or soul without discernment, you create space for connections rooted in respect rather than exploitation. For toxic individuals, this shift is intolerable. They require porous borders through which they can siphon attention, energy, and control. When those borders are fortified, they lose access, and they inevitably drift away in search of someone less guarded. In this way, boundaries not only preserve the self but also act as a natural filter, ensuring that what remains in your life is not parasitic but genuine. The deepest secret that drives toxic people away is self-knowledge. To know yourself fully, your desires, your fears, your wounds, and your strengths, is to become unshakable. Jung taught that the unconscious governs us most when we refuse to look at it. In the shadows of ignorance, others can write our story for us, projecting their will onto our unexamined lives. Toxic individuals thrive in that blindness. They sense when a person has not yet faced themselves, when there are unspoken insecurities and unnamed impulses waiting to be exploited. But when you shine the light of awareness upon your own depths, the manipulator loses their leverage. Self-knowledge is not merely intellectual. It is not gained by reading about psychology or repeating affirmations. It is lived. It emerges from the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself without turning away. To admit where you are weak, where you are hungry for approval, where you are afraid of loneliness. This is self-knowledge. To recognize your tendencies toward anger, envy, or self-pity without judgment but with honesty. This too is self-knowledge. It is the courage to look in the mirror and accept both the saint and the sinner within. Why does this repel toxic individuals? Because they rely on your blindness. If you do not know your fear, they can use it. If you do not know your hunger, they can feed it with poison. If you do not know your worth, they can define it for you. But when you know these things intimately, they can no longer deceive you. The mask they wear becomes transparent to you, because you have unmasked yourself first. This level of awareness creates a presence that is both calm and formidable. You no longer need to defend yourself with aggression, nor prove yourself with pride. You stand rooted in the knowledge of who you are, unafraid of rejection or manipulation, because no external force has the power to define you anymore. Toxic people feel this immediately. They sense that their strategies will fail before they even begin, and so they move on, drawn instead to those who remain in the dark about themselves. Self-knowledge, then, is not only a path to inner freedom, but also a natural protection against exploitation. It dismantles the illusions others attempt to weave around you. It restores your sovereignty by returning to you the authority over your own psyche. In knowing yourself, you step out of the invisible contracts that once bound you to manipulation. To the world, such a person may seem ordinary, but to the toxic mind, they are impenetrable. They cannot be swayed by flattery, subdued by guilt, or captured by fear. They have mastered the secret. To know oneself is to become untouchable.